Fire Mountain Aria, written and narrated by Jill Penrod. Chapter 17. I can really move this? Gianni asked, giving the pile of rubble a wary stare. Trace grinned at him. G's reaction to singing, his deep desire to know and do it all, reminded Trace of himself years ago. I think so, Trace said. Start small and work your way up. We need to find a spot to drop it. That's the big issue. I would say drop it into the ocean, but we can't send through the rock lining your volcano. Gianni turned to him with a frown. So this rock you can move. I can. I'm not sure what kind of rock this is, but I moved some of it earlier, and I had no problem. So our volcano is only lined with something dangerous, something unknown. Gianni glanced at the small bandage on Trace's head, clearly uncomfortable with the danger here. Trace had to agree. He was sick to death of having a warped, torn, painful focus. That was the main reason he was lifting rock today and not working on the problem of getting home. Trace glanced back at Kaya, who was talking to Fidelio, and he knew he was also stalling. He enjoyed Kaya's company, maybe more than he should. He enjoyed Gianni's as well. He liked being the teacher, having them expect wisdom from him and not arrogance. They had never met that first Trace, the one who'd been so rotten and caused so much trouble. They also didn't know about his failure. Unlike Echo, they didn't hover and wait for him to heal. In their minds, he was better than he was, and for a little while longer, he wanted to keep up the facade. Once they left Montefallo, things would change. If he and Echo could save their reef, they would go back to their lives. Or if the reef perished, these people would be focused on putting together new lives elsewhere. He and Echo would go back to the waters, help people, and keep moving. Until a few days ago, that was all he wanted to do. Move on and move on and move on. That felt safe. Now it felt lonely. He wanted to feel Gianni's powerful, complex focus in his head, someone who might actually be stronger than he was. And he wanted Kaya's peaceful, kind focus in his head. Maybe he wanted her in his whole life, a thing he hadn't considered possible for a very long time. Her reaction to his drawing had touched him in some deep place, a place where he'd been bleeding out since the accident, a place he hadn't understood until she delighted in what his hands could do, in what he could do outside of his singing skill. So for now he would use his healing focus as an excuse and spend the day digging out a mine shaft. How about the lower cavern, Fidelio said, stepping into the conversation. I don't think we'll ever finish it. If we get access to this fork again, we won't need to. Gianni nodded. It's below, that way. He pointed down and to the right. Do we need to see it first? We do, Trace said. I need for a few of you to head down there and spread out. Stand at the edges so I can get a feel for the space. I can wrap my focus around an object to move it, but it's not so easy to feel the edges of a wall or a cave, so I need a good idea where I'm sending it before I send it. Then we'll trade, so you can all feel the edges. Are there people near this cavern? No, Gianni said. His eyes widened. Are you worried that stone will hit them? Do you think we should be doing this? We don't know much. Trace laughed. We'll start slowly. It will be fine. The edges are there, but they're not clear. You'll get comfortable with all of this in time. It took a while to get everyone familiar with the edges of the cavern, which turned out to be a low, winding passage. Gianni agreed to having a few more people step in, letting them think Trace was Fleota, although people still gave him and Kaya strange looks. Apparently, Fleota were highly unusual in the caves. Trace could only imagine what would happen if and when the Scavari learned that these particular strangers could move rocks with their minds and a panel of dried reeds. Trace made the first couple moves, surprised by the new reeds. He hoped this panel worked as well outside the reef, because what he felt was clearer than he'd ever experienced before. In fact, most of the work scouting for the edges of the cavern was pointless, because he could clearly feel the edges of the walls, a gentle pressure that this reed panel accentuated. After this, Gianni and Kaya tried to move stone. Kaya took 3 tries before she put enough power into her song to move anything. He had expected that. She was cautious by nature. Then Gianni was going to have the opposite problem. Trace had no doubt that before the day was over, Gianni would have his first singing headache from moving more with each jump than was good for him. Live and learn, Trace thought. His mother had said that many times when Trace had overestimated his own abilities. If only he'd done better at the learning part. Soon they found a rhythm, with Trace moving the largest stones, Gianni the next, and Kaya taking care of the rubble. Fidelio stayed with them, watching in wonder. Gianni had sent the others away, still not sure how much he wanted his people to know of this change in their leader and their world. Gianni was ahead of Trace, moving a long, low boulder, when Trace turned to Kaya, who followed them, clearing the smaller pieces. "Your head is okay?" he asked. "It's fine," she said. "Am I that much weaker than the 2 of you?" "No," he said, "but you're not as confident in your strength yet. Would you rather tackle the larger rocks?" "This seems to work," she said. "Is Gianni as strong as you?" "He might be stronger," Trace said. "I suspect he'll overwork his focus and hurt tonight. A singer's first singing headache is quite the milestone." "You won't stop him? Warn him?" she asked. "If he tries one that will endanger him, yes, but not otherwise. The only way he'll learn his limits is to test them and occasionally surpass them. I think he'll turn out to be a very talented singer. If this reef survives, that skill will help him down here." She sighed. "Is it wrong to hope we have to leave? Gianni shouldn't live in the dark. None of them should. They should be out in the wind and the sun. Maybe the lack of babies has as much to do with how we live as the environment. Do many people outside Montefallo live in caves?" "Not the way the Scavari do," Trace admitted. "But your people live in the light, and you don't have children either." She let out her breath. "No, we don't. So my theory doesn't hold up, but I still hate that they live in the caves all the time. During Dim Note, Gianni reminded me of a little boy. He was excited about everything: the wind, the cold, the auroras, the sounds of the reeds and the breeze. I feel like he's missing things down here." Of course, he thought the Fleota were torturing their children by making them live in the cold. I guess each of us has our problems. "I can't imagine saving this reef," Trace admitted, "mostly because there's so little in here I understand. But we'll get some good minds on it and see what we can do. We might evacuate and then continue to try to save it. Maybe your people will decide they don't want to come back." "I won't want to come back," she said. "Maybe that's not true. But if I can see in the light out there, I will struggle to come back." Gianni made a noise from ahead, and Trace found the man staring at the spot where the rock had been, his focus slightly warped. "That hurt," he said. "It means I did too much. Did you know that rock was too big?" Trace shrugged. "The only way to learn your limits is to sidle right up to them and sometimes step over the line." Gianni laughed. "You have an evil streak, Trace Odell, or you're a very wise teacher. I haven't decided yet." Trace took the next 2 boulders, and then he stopped, because they'd just hit another lesson. This one was going to be about teamwork, because this rock was too big and heavy for any of them to move alone. "Oh," Gianni said. "That one is a monster, and I'm not sure anything beyond it will be intact. Maybe this was a waste of time." "I doubt it," Trace said. "Kaya, we need you." Trace played the song to move it, wrapping his focus around it to get an idea of its size before letting the wind go. He needed to do this well and not hurt anyone. "Can you move that?" Gianni asked. "Not alone," Trace said. It's time for us to learn a couple new songs. One is the stamina song. Both of you have done it without a panel, but I'm more comfortable if we do it the old-fashioned way, so that's the first song. Then I think I'll have Gianni break it up for us. That's another song. It won't easily fit in the other cavern, so we'll change the size. I'll lift and hold it with Kaya's help, and Gianni will shatter it, and then all of us will switch to the jump song to send the pieces down. They didn't look sure of this plan, but they let him teach them the new songs. As usual, Gianni picked them up more quickly than Kaya, but eventually both of them knew them. "It's getting late," Trace said when Kaya played the stamina song perfectly. "I think we should finish tomorrow. Let our foci have the night off before we continue. How far are we?" Gianni shrugged. "I'm not sure. Nobody remembers the closed-off sections well. We were children. I just know this was the best producing vein we had, and it was the safest. That may not be the case now, but it's worth trying." "You were very young when the quakes hit, weren't you?" Trace asked. "We lost the elders," Gianni said. "The oldest Scavari is 29 years old." Trace shook his head. "What? And it was 16 years ago? Only children survived?" "No, we had adults for a couple years, and then some kind of illness took those." Trace turned to Kaya. "The Fleota didn't help them?" "We didn't know," Kaya said. Gianni was scared and kept a few things to himself. Gianni's focus pulsed with guilt and shame and anger, and Trace put out his hand. "I'm sorry, G, and amazed. This is a reef full of survivors. You all put me to shame." Gianni's focus began to calm. "Our adults never quite trusted the Fleota, and so I didn't know what would happen if they knew. Now that I know some of them, I wish I'd made different choices." "I know what that feels like," Trace said. Kaya gave him a strange look, and he knew his focus was giving away a few things. She seemed especially sensitive to his moods. Only Echo had ever read him so well. "Anyway, we should head out. We'll be back early." He and Kaya left the cave and headed across the lake to Kaya's ISPA tour. He assumed Echo wouldn't approve of him staying with the young woman, and that thought made him smile. Even before losing their mother, Echo had tended to mother him. He hated that he'd been gone so long, knowing she would worry, and he hadn't tried that hard to get home, not like he should have. He suspected she'd spent every moment of the past few days trying to find him, and he'd wasted time making friends and thinking romantic thoughts about a girl. "Are you okay?" Kaya asked. "I am. What is my focus telling you?" "I'm not sure. That you're sad, maybe? I can't imagine being able to read everyone. Does it make you crazy?" "You learn to shut a lot of it out," Trace said. "And the way people feel versus what they say, believe what they say. People lie, almost all the time. What they say and what they feel doesn't usually line up, and the polite thing to do is to let the lies stand." "Even with friends?" she asked. "So I've been offending you by trying to figure out your focus?" No, with friends and family it's different. But still, for the sake of privacy and respect, it's okay to let someone lie. Echo knows when I lie to her, and I know when she lies to me, but those words matter too. Even when the words don't correctly express the feelings, they count. They're part of the truth. "So a lie is part of the truth?" she asked. "Very often, we don't think we're lying," he said. "Words often lead us to understand the feelings. I can't feel what my focus says to you. Sometimes you're going to know my feelings before I do." "Oh," she shook her head. "It's confusing. I'm sorry if I offended." "You haven't offended me at all. It's comforting to know someone's paying attention." "Trace, what happened? I know I shouldn't ask. You just told me not to ask, but it's so deep sometimes, this chasm in your focus, like a giant hole of pain." He didn't want to tell her, but he looked down into her eyes and saw true compassion, true concern, and he wanted her to know. He wanted the words and feelings to line up, wanted her to know this about him. I lost my family. There was an accident on a job. We were recharging a zygotic sun, and there was a structural issue with the reef nobody could foresee. Except I did. I saw the signs, and when I told the charterhead, he ignored me. So I let it go. I did what he wanted me to do. The reef crumbled. We evacuated every citizen. That was the most painful focal damage I ever did to myself. But Echo and I lost the rest of our family, trying to get the last of the people out. I was arrogant and spiteful and stupid, and I lost my family. He had meant to tell her the facts, but he'd given her more. She said nothing, but her focus pounded her concern, her distress and compassion. Silently, she slipped her hand into his, and they continued the walk home in silence. "Thank you," he said just before they entered the dark boat. "For?" she asked. He shrugged. "For knowing that and still letting me come home with you?" She simply smiled. When he got inside, he found a stack of pages and a primitive writing utensil on the table, the only table in the ispatur. "You found some," Kaya said to Amma, delight in her focus. "I did," Amma said. "I had to walk quite a ways, but the morning was bright, and it's good to move after being so still during dim note. But now I want to see. I want to know why this is important." Trace felt awkward about performing, but that evening he drew another image of Kaya, as well as one of Gianni, and then Amma. He also sketched Tormandu, the bay village with its hill-like homes and fields, as well as the stone wall behind it. He'd now drawn this image twice. For some reason, the little village caught his imagination. Okay, he knew the reason. It reminded him of Bougainville's main bay village. The image reminded him of home. Kaya put her hand on his arm before they went to their sleeping rolls that night. "Drawing makes you happy, but it also makes you sad," she said. "I'm not supposed to ask, I know, but you said your mother wanted you to learn. Is that why it makes you sad?" He nodded. "Tormandu reminds me of Bougainville, my home, the reef that was destroyed on my watch. And yes, every time I sketch anything, I see my mother smile and hear her tell me she's proud of what I can do. My singing made her proud too, but for some reason, drawing hurts in a way singing doesn't." Kaya put her hand on his chest. "Singing is who you are. It uses all of you. It's like breathing. But what you put on paper comes from here. It's how you think, Trace. It's how you feel and connect to your heart. I can see why it would hurt more than singing. Thank you for sharing with us, even if it hurts you." Maybe because he'd taken a little weight off by sharing with Kaya, Trace slept soundly, and in the morning they returned to the cave, where they found Gianni waiting for them at the cave entrance. "You're impatient," Kaya said with a smile when she saw him. "I'm not convinced we can do this," he said with a shrug. "I hope we don't hurt you, Trace." "We'll be fine," Trace said. "If it's too much, we'll stop. We'll make sure nobody else is around, so a failure can't hurt anyone." Kaya gave him a strange look when he said it, and he wished he'd told both of them. Gianni caught the look, and likely something in their foci, and he frowned. Like Kaya, he was working hard to understand the shifts and emotions that came through a focus, so he was as sensitive to it as she was, and he knew they had a secret. For the first time, he wondered if Gianni had feelings for Kaya. Was he stepping into this situation and causing someone pain? He hoped not. "Last night I told Kaya about my family," he said. Gianni raised his eyebrows. "It's a story about failure." Kaya shook her head. "It's a story about misplaced guilt, not failure. And maybe something inevitable and terrible that not a soul on this world could have prevented." Gianni said nothing, and Trace gave him the same story he'd told her, except this time he kept to the facts. Kaya had already given him the emotion. "I'm sorry," Gianni said. "So we all know loss, the big losses." "Yes," Trace said, "we do. Do we want to move rock this morning or share sad stories?" Gianni smiled at that. "I suppose it's a good day to move rock, but I think sometimes it's good to share the sad stories, and I say that as someone who never does." Kaya put her hand on Gianni's arm, compassion flowing from her focus, and the man gave her a sad smile. Trace was jealous, and that bothered him. The original plan was that all of them smash the huge boulder and send it in pieces. Kaya had gotten especially good at sending multiple pieces at once, and he knew Gianni would master that in moments. But it would go faster if he and Gianni held it and let Kaya smash it. Then it would still be wrapped in their foci, and they could jump it in one single shot instead of multiple, smaller leaps. He also felt it would be more impressive the second way. He wanted them to be impressed, to see how much power they truly possessed. He explained what he wanted to do, and he and Gianni began the song to raise the boulder off the ground, their foci mingling and linking as they formed a barrier around the rock. It was heavy, almost too heavy even for the two of them, and Trace knew Gianni was near the edge of his strength. Trace pushed a little more power of his own into the barrier, wincing as he stepped slightly over the line, and he nodded to Kaya. "Now," he said, "put as much power behind it as you can." Before she called the wind, something shifted. Suddenly he felt a jump song wrap around him, and he had to let go of the stone or be torn apart. As he did, he felt Gianni push power of his own to try to pick up the slack. "No," he yelled to Gianni. "Let it go." He didn't know if Gianni heard him, but he doubted it, feeling damage and pain from the man before he felt the lurch of the jump that had grabbed him. A flash let him know he'd finished a jump, and Echo wrapped her arms around him, her focus flooding with relief and joy. "We did it," she said, squeezing him. "We got you home." He appreciated the effort, but her timing couldn't have been worse.